So, if you're Canadian, or even if you're American, because I saw it on, Daily Wire and a couple of other U.S.-based news sites, news feeds, you probably know by now about the ruling or the settlement that the Canadian government is making with Omar Khadr for $10.5 million. The case goes something like this. Omar Khadr's family, his entire family, have been jihadists since, well, for a long time. And Omar Khadr, when he was 15, was in Afghanistan fighting against U.S. forces. And apparently, nice signals, guys. Thanks. Apparently he lobbed a grenade at a U.S. forces medic, killing him, and the medic, from what I understand, was approaching to treat Omar Khadr, because I guess he was wounded. So killed him and blinded a fellow U.S. serviceman who was in Afghanistan. And he was captured, went to Guantanamo Bay. Apparently while there he suffered abuse by interrogators whose names I don't remember. And so he filed a lawsuit with the Canadian government because the Canadian government helped U.S. forces to hold him and detain him, when the argument goes that they should have sought to free him because he wasn't the member of a foreign army. He was an illegal combatant, as they say, right? Anyway, I think he sued the government. His lawyers sued the government for $20 million. He ended up getting $10.5, and it came out just recently that they were going to pay him $10.5 million. And apparently this was a leak. The government did not want anybody to know about this payment because they realized it'd be bad. It would look bad because Omar Khadr, while the media's tried to spin him as being, a victim of his own father's radicalization, most people judge him as being a terrorist. Now, Black Pigeon Speaks does a good video on the whole Khadr family and the decision by the Canadian government to pay Omar Khadr $10.5 million. His video is intentionally inflammatory. He makes an effort to exaggerate the pronunciation of Omar Khadr's name by going Khadr, and all the names of his family, using the exaggerated sound in their names. And that's a little grating and a little bit, I don't know, necessarily inflammatory or directly inflammatory, intentionally inflammatory. But despite that, it goes into a pretty detailed history of the whole Khadr family and how they've been involved with Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, and terrorist groups for a long time. So it's not like Omar Khadr was this, this poor kid who was just caught up in the hysteria, or was brainwashed. This was part of his family. This was part of his culture, his immediate culture. And There's an article that somebody linked to on Facebook, explaining why Omar Khadr is deserving of a settlement from the Canadian government. And I read it, and it started talking about his treatment at Guantanamo Bay. It was talking about, how the fact that he was underage, and he used a lot of legal definitions to make the case. Basically, he was an unlawful or illegal combatant. He wasn't a member of a foreign army. He's a Canadian citizen. Therefore, he's deserving of a regular civilian criminal trial. But instead, he was locked up in Guantanamo Bay for a number of years. They shone bright lights in his eyes. They did the whole thing, right? They interrogated him, and the implication is that his confession that he threw the grenade was made under duress. Even though he's admitted that he did it, even after the fact, after he was brought back to Canada, after he was, set free, he still maintains that he did it, but that he's given all that up, and that's all behind him now. I'm not so convinced. His entire family, most of his life, even though he was a Canadian citizen, he spent most of his life prior to being captured living outside of Canada. He lived in Afghanistan. He lived in Pakistan. He didn't live in Canada. Apparently his mother didn't want him to live in Canada because she was afraid that he would be socialized by, the secular country. It was only when his father was injured that they came back to Canada so that he could receive medical treatment on the Canadian taxpayer's dime. And I'm sorry, the idea that we have to, this might sound terrible, but from what I read in this article, it's portraying the Khadrs and it's portraying Omar Khadr as, just regular people. But I don't believe that. The religiously motivated terrorist does not view his victim as a person. They view the kafir as less than human. And they would not show the same mercy had the roles been reversed. If a U.S. serviceman were captured by the Khadr family, first they might try and extort the government for money, but I have no doubt that they would treat him mercilessly, with no regard for pain or suffering or anything else. And quite frankly, I wish they hadn't captured Omar Khadr. I wish they just killed him outright. I mean, he was 15 years old at the time, but if he had committed a crime in Canada at the age of 15, there'd be people calling for him to be tried as an adult. If he'd thrown a grenade at a cop and killed a cop and blinded another cop, they'd be calling for him to be tried as an adult. So, I don't think we should show mercy to the merciless. And I know the argument goes, well, then we're no better than they are. Sure. But maybe it's about time that people started being a little bit worse. I don't think that Islamic terrorists are convinced by our adherence to higher ideals. I don't think that we can show them a better way. I don't think that, the idea that if we just show tolerance and patience with people who absolutely hate us, that they'll eventually come around. I think the only way that you can beat people with that kind of mindset, that everyone outside of their little tribe is worthy of death or oppression. It's one or the other with those minded with that mindset. You're either going to be converted to Islam, or you'll remain dhimmi, and you'll be oppressed. You'll be forced to pay the jizya, which is a tax to the faithful by the unfaithful. And the only way I think you can fight those people with that mindset, is just utterly destroy them. And because you can't tell on a immigration application what their specific mindset is, what an individual's specific opinion is on that matter, you certainly shouldn't be just letting everybody come in to the country who may or may not hold these views. If there ever were like a full-scale war between the religion of peace and the nations of the cross, it might be fought by, initially be, started by hardcore jihadists. But if you don't think that the moderate Muslims would soon get on board very quickly, if they realize that the tides were going to turn in the favor of the jihadists, or the favor of the Nation of Islam, they would, no doubt. Brigitte Gabriel made the point, the vast majority of peaceful people in any conflict don't matter. It's the people willing to engage in the warfare, the people willing to commit the crimes. They're the ones who matter. They're the ones who do the damage. They're the ones that change history and destroy nations and destroy societies. So anyway, I ranted long enough. Thanks.